Good morning to one and all present here. So, we welcome you to the fifth day of the 1 week faculty development program on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and genomics. This is session one of the day 5, and we have with us Dr. D. Jude Hemant sir from Karunya University to impart his knowledge on understanding the mystery behind deep learning. Dr. D. Jude Hemant sir received his BE degree in EC from Bharatiyar University, ME from Anna University, and PhD from Karunya University. His research areas include computational intelligence and image processing. He has authored more than 120 research papers in reputed SCIE and Scopus indexed journals. His cumulative impact factor is more than 160. He is also being editing a number of books, and he's also an associate editor in numerous research journals. He has received a number of project grant, especially with University of Westminster, UK, and also Government of India, numerous project grants. He also serves as a research scientist of Computational Intelligence and Information Systems Lab and various other labs throughout the world. He has also been organizing committee member of several international conferences across the globe. Currently, he is working as an associate professor in Department of ECE, Karunya University. We heartily welcome you, sir. We hope that we'll gain more from you, and everyone happy learning today. Thank you. I now hand over the session to Dr. Jude Hemant, sir.
Madam, thank you, madam. Can you? Yeah. Is my screen visible, madam?
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. Um, Let me cut off my video. So I can save some more bandwidth. Okay. Thank you, madam, for your introduction. And I thank the management and the organizing team of this workshop, which is the need of the hour, Sri Krishna College of Engineering and Technology, for inviting me to deliver this talk on deep learning today. Thank you once again. And I also thank you participants, because I see a wide variety of participants from different parts of India. Maybe even I could be surprised to see one of my neighbors sitting on the other side to listen to my lecture. Thank you very much, participants, because it is the participants who is going to make the workshop a successful one. So the today's topic I have chosen based on the workshop theme is understanding the mystery behind deep learning approaches. So I'll be handling, now the time is 9:35. I may need around 1.5 hours for this my talk, right? And then we can have a short question answer session for 15 minutes. I will try to wind up within 11. It may go up to 11:10 or something like that. I kindly request your patience for that. Okay. So understanding the mystery behind deep learning approaches. Nowadays, whenever you go for in the area of machine learning or artificial intelligence, immediately the people ask about deep learning. They ask whether you know deep learning. And if I pose the same question to the participants who are sitting on the other side, right, 80% of the people may say that I know deep learning. 20% may say that I do not know deep learning. So this lecture session is suitable for both of you, in the sense, if you do not know deep learning, maybe you may be from a background of mechanical or mathematics or bio, who are not much into the concept of deep learning. you can know all the informations which I'm going to give now. You can understand the basic concepts of deep learning. On the other side, my focus is mainly on the people who say they know deep learning. Right? But whenever we look at the research papers, which is the actual output of research, the actual concepts is misled, or they are giving all the information in a wrong manner, or sometimes they say that they can go for a hybrid method again, which is absolutely wrong. The reason is they were unable to understand the real in-depth concepts of deep learning, and they use some softwares and take some results, which is again not going to guarantee the acceptance of their research manuscript. Right? That's why my focus is specifically on giving the in-depth details of deep learning. If you say deep learning, who all the people who are very good in deep learning, they're not going to give anything new. All their contents are available in the textbook, but the in-depth details is what is important to the participants to make sure they go for some innovative contributions in that specific field. Right? So if you are new, if you are a beginner, then you can know many stuffs. If you are already doing in deep learning, then you can understand the in-depth concepts of what I am going to say. Again, I am going to classify the participants on the other side into 3 categories. You may be a beginner, you may be an intermediate, you may be an expert. I have arranged my lectures in such a way that it will cater the needs of all the varieties of people. There will be theoretical concepts, there will be case studies, there will be mathematical derivations, there will be also some programming codes, right? So depending upon the level which you are in, you can take those steps, right? So before going into the agenda, I always give a slide like this in my webinars to make sure that how you grow, right? This is not for other people, this is for me. This is a good self-evaluation tool for any researcher. Try to have a PowerPoint slide or something like of this category, then you can check how you are moving every month or every week or every quarter of an year. Right? If you don't have a self-evaluation tool, then it is very difficult. Even if you learn about deep learning, if you go into depth of concepts of your basic engineering background, still you will not be able to grow. Right? So this is my slide, right? You can take a sample from this. Maybe if you are a beginner, the bullet points may be less or the numbers may be less. But gradually, when you keep on self-evaluating yourself, you will be automatically growing to a world-renowned scientist. Right? So you must have an areas of interest. You may have several allied areas, but you must have a route. Right? My route is already into machine intelligence or computational intelligence or soft computing, and my application part is image processing. And the first 4 points talks about the publications. Right? You must know what are the publications. You must go for publication. Only Sci 99%, 1% you can go for Scopus. Right? Don't go anything beyond Scopus. Cumulative impact factor is very important. Number of citations, H index. These are some parameters which talks about the publications. Next, once publications, next comes the category of projects. Right? So normally people confuse with the publications and the projects. Right? Without publications, they immediately jump into project, which is a wrong idea, I should say. Only if you grow your research expertise in terms of publications, then you should go into the concept of research publications. You test several methods, and whichever is going to be successful, you apply in your real-time situation and develop into a project. Then other hidden parameters available are the books. Nowadays, the publishers, standard publishers like IEEE, Springer, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, many are there. They are concentrating more on book publications. So once you get some very good publications, only then you will get a chance of publishing a book. Then they will ask you to join in their journals as associate editor, where you will be recognized for your credentials. Then you will have the book series editor, and you can join with collaborative works with other foreign labs. Right? These are some of the labs which I am collaborated with. So it is not like just collaborating and keeping shut. Right? It's not like that. Every alternate days, I will have Zoom meeting apart from my classes, where I sit, discuss with these people, and bring out papers and projects. That's the way how a researcher should go, irrespective of whatever engineering background or arts background you may be. Right? Then you will be invited for keynote talks, where you can share your thoughts, your expertise, which will be useful for the community also. So now we'll go into the agenda. So first I will be talking about the need for deep learning approaches, right? This will be much suitable for the beginners or who are in the intermediate level. Then we will see some of the types of deep learning approaches. Deep learning is a very broad word, right? Under this, we have several methods or algorithms that we can see in the brief overview types of deep learning networks. And in that, I am going to take one deep learning network and I'm going to deal in detail, which I'm going to call it as deep convolutional neural networks, which is the commonly used one and which is the spinal cord of any deep learning system. And then now people are moving slowly from deep convolutional neural networks to another advanced structure, which is called as transfer learning. So we'll be seeing about transfer learning, and normally people use transfer learning, and in the research paper they write it as deep learning, right? So you should be very clear. That's the reason why our papers get rejected within 2 to 3 days. So you should be very clear about the difference between the different methodologies. Then I will be giving an application with respect to the current situation, COVID-19 detection from the lung images, and then I will pose some open research problems. Maybe some research scholars may be sitting on the other side, or you may be a professor who can give this problem to a scholar for the benefit of everyone. Then we can have a question answer session. Question answer session is very, very important. We normally ask our students to ask questions, but when we sit in the workshop, we rarely come front to ask questions. Feel free to come. It's after all, it's a discussion so that you can grow, because the way in which I am going to teach may be different from what you are having in your mind. Right? So you can make use of that question answer session. So first we'll go into the concept of need for deep learning approaches. So before going into the necessity, I want you to make sure that there is a prerequisite for deep learning. Right? I'm not sure how many of you have heard about this word, artificial neural networks. This artificial neural networks is the base for deep learning. It is like the foundation we have for a house. Only if you have a foundation, then you can build first floor and second floor. Right? If you don't have a foundation, you cannot build. Even if you are going to build that, it is not going to sustain for a longer time. Nowadays, whenever people come to me for collaborative works or students, whether they're coming for a project, immediately they say deep learning, right? But I will ask them, do you know the base? If you don't know the base, definitely you will not be able to do more things on the concept of deep learning. Right? I'm not sure how many of you are very good in artificial neural networks. If you are not good in artificial neural networks, please, after this lecture, go back, have an idea on artificial neural networks, check how it is implemented, and then you come back to the deep learning structure, right? One step at a time. That's the best way of growing further in your research. So the prerequisite is artificial neural networks. Maybe I can brush up the details, but I cannot go into the complete because already we have more contents for deep learning part. Deep learning techniques use the neural architectures only. Okay. Without ANN, it is very, very difficult to understand the concepts of deep learning. So history of deep learning. This is an interesting slide. Maybe I feel maybe some of you who are sitting on the other side's photo also come after 10 years or 15 years. These are the people who framed the concepts of artificial intelligence. They sowed the seeds of artificial intelligence or today's deep learning. So I will just give the hierarchy of the area of artificial intelligence. So when you take this category of the broader umbrella of artificial intelligence, AI stands first. It is the biggest probable umbrella. The main purpose of AI, right, is to create an artificial human being who can behave exactly like a natural human being. Exactly, 100%. That is the main aim of artificial intelligence. Under artificial intelligence, one category is called as machine learning. Normally, people mix these words in a random way. They say artificial intelligence and machine learning and deep learning without understanding the actual hierarchy. The second comes the machine learning. There are many categories: computer vision, natural language processing, robotics. Everything comes under the subset of artificial intelligence. One among them is machine learning. This machine learning is the process which make the artificial human being, which you are going to create, learn from the environment. Right? Under machine learning, we have several types. One type is artificial neural network. Right? And in artificial neural network, the advanced representation is deep learning. So if you want to come to deep learning, AI, then ML, then ANN, then deep learning. This is the correct way. So this 1940, we had the concept of electronic brain, right? The seeds for the today's deep learning were sold on that specific year. And there are Mukalos and Pitts. These are the two people who framed the idea of that. Then we went into the concept of perceptron, Adeline, Madeline, so many stuffs came out, right? But if you carefully look at that, there is a gap between 1970 and 1980. This is called as AI winter, in the sense there is some problem with the networks which were encountered earlier, right? Like perceptron. So when that problem exists, the scientists thought we cannot do further with artificial neural networks. It is a failure model, and nobody took care of that for another 10 years. Again, from 1990 or 1986, again, another group of people, Rumelhart, Hinton, and Williams, they started working on that specific stuff, and they derived the backbone of ANN. Right? Backbone of deep learning is CNN, backbone of ANN is backpropagation neural network. I'm not sure whether the previous people would have given some details about that. Right? Backpropagation neural network. So from backpropagation neural network, we went into SVM, support vector machine, and there are so many other methods. And next, in 2010, we landed under deep learning. This deep learning method is actually a PhD thesis from a student from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I will tell you how he thought, what's the thought process inside him, how he derived this earth-shaking research in the area of artificial intelligence. Why I am giving this slide is every network, every algorithm, every method which we derive or which we frame will have definitely a drawback, right? The idea of research is you need to find out the drawback of the previous method and try to solve it. But unfortunately, today we see lots and lots of research papers where there is no motive or there is no research problem identification. Without that, they take some methods and do some experiments. It is not acceptable, at least in the publication arena. So this is the way how it moved, because each one of them have a specific drawback, and finally we are into deep neural network, and there are also many drawbacks available. If possible, we can do something on that. So what is the difference between artificial neural networks and deep neural networks? As I told you, deep learning is an advanced form of artificial neural network. So what is the difference, you may ask? Deep learning is the advanced representation of ANN. The word deep learning, it's a phrase where we have the word deep and learning. You must understand what do you mean by deep and what do you mean by learning, right? The word deep in deep learning corresponds to more layers, right? When I say layers, you look at the first diagram, which is on my left hand side, right? On my left hand side, which is a simple normal artificial neural network. You would have looked at it several times in the previous sessions, right? You have an input layer, you have an output layer, and you have a hidden layer. This is the normal structure of a artificial neural network. But when you look at the other side, deep neural network, right, that also looks exactly similar to your artificial neural network. But the only difference is the number of layers you have is more, right? When I say layers, the column-wise arrangement of circles or neurons, they are going to be more, right? Why do you increase the layer, right? The answer I will give you in the subsequent slides. But for the time being, you understand that the main difference between ANN and deep learning is your architecture will have more number of layers. Now, the question that come to your mind is, can't we have an ANN with multiple layers? A normal question, right? You can have one input layer, you can have one output layer, and you can have more than one hidden layers. Absolutely possible, right? In the normal BPN, which I told you in the previous slide, you can have more hidden layers as you like. Then why should we go for deep learning when we already have multi-layer neural networks? Such type of networks are called as multi-layer artificial neural networks. Why should we go for deep learning? Right? The answer is more number of layers means high accuracy, right? I will validate my statement, which I'm giving in the slide, with the experimental results later. More number of layers means high accuracy. Then BPN, is BPN not accurate? However, the conventional ANN based training algorithms are not much beneficial if we increase the number of layers. The reason is the second point, right? The second word of your deep learning talks about learning. Learning or methodology is the way in which you make ANN store more amount of data, or ANN learn from the environment. So when you say you are going to increase the number of layers, the conventional training algorithm or process or the learning procedures you are going to use fail, right? That means there is an incompatibility between a BPN with more number of layers and the learning process. Right? This is not given by me. You can go to this specific link, literature survey, which clearly defines the low quality results obtained with the conventional training algorithms of ANN. I'm talking about BPN when they increase more than one hidden layer. Normally in the maybe the research, when you look at the research papers 5 years back, they say they are testing with more than 2 hidden layers, 3 hidden layers. Nowadays that concept is completely abolished. We went into the concept of deep learning even 2 to 3 years back. So you can look at this link where you can find the validation for my statement. The second point, right? This is the first one. The first one is we need more number of layers so that the accuracy of the overall system, whether it's a mechanical system or a biotechnology system or a mathematical system or a computer system, whatever it may be, it is going to give more accuracy. The second point is specifically deep learning methods are specifically used for pattern recognition applications, right? Pattern recognition. This is the key word for deep learning. What do you mean by pattern? What do you mean by recognition? Right? A human being, when he is walking on the road, right, what does he do? He will look at all the different places, right? And all the data which he is seeing is going to fill his brain. And he is going to recognize that it is a house, that it is a car, this is a bus, this is a dog, this is a post office, anything of that sort. So before going into any complex application, the first thing the human being does is recognition of objects, which we call it as pattern. So when you are trying to create an artificial human being, that artificial structure also should be in a position to recognize stuffs, recognize objects. For that application, we specifically go for deep learning approach. So I'll give an example for that. Take a simple case of number recognition. If you give this to a human being, he can easily say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when you give it to a machine, how it is going to identify that it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. For that, when you go for the conventional artificial neural, I'm just comparing artificial neural network and deep learning. Right? This is the second aspect of that. The general block diagram of conventional ANN is this one, right? If you have already used that, I'm very sure that 60%, at least 60 to 70% of the people sitting on the other side must have used it. Database input, you need data. Then you go for pre-processing because you will have some noises on that. Then you will go for a specific block called as feature extraction, where you will convert all your images or signals or whatever may be the raw data into numerical data or numbers. Then you give it to your artificial neural network and classify. This is the structure of a normal artificial neural network. But when you go into the concept of deep learning, it is completely different. In the sense that you do not have the concept of feature extraction. This is the point I want to stress onto all the participants who are sitting on the other side. Even yesterday, as an editor, when I entered into my login area, I find papers with deep learning, but there is also a feature extraction block in the block diagram. It is methodologically completely wrong. Right? So we do not have any feature extraction when you go for deep learning process. When I say we do not have feature extraction, there is no need for manual feature extraction. Right? Nobody, when I'm walking on the road, when there is a dog, I see the dog and automatically my brain says it is going to be dog because I am already trained with the features of a dog. Nobody come there and tell, hey Jude, look at this. It has 2 legs, 4 legs. It is very short than human beings. It has furry hairs. All the stuff nobody's going to say. My brain is automatically going to extract the features. That's the way a human being live in this earth. So why should we go for manual feature extraction? This is the thought which came into the mind of that PhD student in Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His professors and everybody then worked on, and they developed a complete system of deep learning. And this deep learning is going to extract features on its own. There is no manual feature extraction block, but it is going to do the process on its own. We will see later how it is going to do that. The deep learning architecture will itself extract the features, necessary features. Right. Now you can ask me a question. What is wrong in having the manual feature extraction? Why should we go for an automated feature extraction? Now I'll give an example. Right. The first one is the necessity for expertise can be avoided. So say, for example, if you want to differentiate myself and another, maybe a younger participant on the other side, if you take the color of the hair as a feature, what will happen? My hair is still black in color, and I'm very sure that his color, hair color also will be black in color. Then how the machine is going to identify? So when manually we extract some specific features, there is a chance. There is a chance that we may go wrong. When you give color of hair as an input to the machine as a feature, definitely it is going to confuse whether it is going to be Jude or some XY set. Right? So if you know some expertise, if there is some expert who know myself and him, then he can say, okay, these are the features, you extract that alone and give. But for most of the applications, we do not have expertise with us. Right? Again, if you don't have expertise, the chance of accuracy going down is very, very high. You will get inaccurate results. We'll take a small case study for the same digit recognition application. I have taken 3 features: horizontal lines, vertical lines, and small circles. Let us see what happens. Now, this is the data, input data, and the machine should identify whether it is 0 to 9. First feature I have taken is the vertical line. Now you observe closely how many digits in this 0 to 9 category has vertical lines. You have 1, you have 4, you have 9. And if I ask you to write 0 to 9, you can write it in an infinite number of ways, where all the digits may also have some vertical lines. So when you give vertical line as a feature, your machine will be confused whether it is 1 or 4 or 9. When you go for horizontal lines, right? 0, you can write 0 also in such a way that you have a small horizontal line. You have 2, you have 3, you have 4, you have 7, you have 5, right? All the digits have some horizontal lines at some point of time, which is not again going to help the system to make a decision. And the third one is your small circles, where you can see 2 is having a small circle, 6, 9, everything is going to have small circles, where the machine is going again to be confused. So when you go for manual feature extraction, there is a high chance that your answer will go wrong. Right? That's why we went into the concept of deep learning with an automated feature extraction. This is what a beginner should know first when they go into the concept of deep learning. The first point is accuracy. It's not about any other performance measure, but it is all about improving the accuracy of the overall system. How do we increase the accuracy? 2 points. First one is by increasing the number of layers, and then avoiding the manual feature extraction when you go for pattern recognition applications. Right? So you need not wonder whether my engineering background has pattern recognition application. Definitely your system will have that. You go for your lathe machine, right? Or you say a manufacturing defect identification with a pencil factory, right? Or identifying the nuts and bolts. When you go to some automation industries, you can see they may have the nuts and bolts in a heap. How to separate that? Right? Manually, it is not possible. So when it is a machine-based system, first it should know that it is a nut, this is a bolt. Right? So all the applications, whether it's biomedical or bioengineering or chemical, wherever you have engineering, you should have pattern recognition application. For that, we make use of this deep learning. So with this basic introduction, with basic stuffs, I'm hopeful that you can follow the subsequent information which I'm going to give now. So this deep learning, again, it's a broad category like artificial neural networks, right? Artificial neural networks is a broad category, but under that you have perceptron, you have BPN, you have Hopfield network, you have RBF, you have LBQ. So many networks are available. In the same way, deep learning approaches are also having so many methods within it, right? This is a complete slide which will be very useful for a data scientist or a machine intelligence researcher, but we are going to concentrate only on the box which I have given, right? That is all about your deep learning. So the basic one is deep neural network. We have deep belief network, convolutional neural network, because when you see the word itself, it has neural network within that. That's why I told you, without neural network, it's not going to be easy. Convolutional neural network and deep Boltzmann machine, recurrent machine, and so many types of methods are available. If you Google today, you can find another 50 different types of deep learning approaches. The methods are changing every day. How do they change? The people are looking at the drawback of the previous existing methods, and they are developing some modified approaches in such a way that drawback is eliminated. So when you do some work, concentrate on looking at the drawback of the existing methods. So now, before going into the detailed convolutional neural network, I will be giving a brief idea of different types of networks, just basic hints, so that if you are from computer science background, you may get a better information. In the sense, I want to give a complete package of deep learning within this 1.5 hours. So autoencoders. So these autoencoders are another deep learning approach. When you look at this architecture, if I ask you a question, can you tell me whether it is an ANN or deep learning architecture? You can immediately say it is a deep learning architecture because you have many hidden layers. But this autoencoder is specifically used for dimensionality reduction applications. It is used for dimensionality reduction applications. When you say dimensionality reduction, you have 1 lakh data, right? You have 1 lakh data, but all the 1 lakh data, if you give to the system will get stuck. The computational complexity will increase. So you need some method to pick only the best data from this 1 lakh data. That process is called as dimensionality reduction. Just a pre-processing where you are reducing the data from infinite to finite. Principal component analysis is one method commonly used for that, and this autoencoder is an advanced version of principal component analysis. How does it reduces the data? Right? It is used to generate codes. That means a compressed form of data representation. So if you look at this diagram, the blue color dots, it is the input data, right? Now the red color dot is the encoded data. That is the place from where you are going to get the codes. I'm going to call that output as codes. Now, if you look carefully, observe that how many circles I have in the input data or the input layer? I have 6. But how many do I have in the red color layer? 2. That means each neuron can take only one input or give only one output. That means 6 inputs have been reduced into 2 outputs. Is it not an example for dimensionality reduction? Right? So people observe this and they use this for dimensionality reduction applications. So after finding this output, you will not know whether it is correct or not. So that what you are going to do is you are going to have a reconstruction process to check that whether your input data and your reconstructed data are same. If your input data and reconstructed data are same, then all the answer which you have got in the red color layer is going to be exactly perfect. Right? So the output in this architecture is from the red color layer where you are going to get the minimized version of your data, compressed version of your data. If you want to have a better understanding, you can look at the second diagram where you have the encoder, the input layer, and the middle H corresponds to the red color layer and the output layer, where red color layer acts as input for the output layer. The decoding is available to check the correctness of codes. So, but some conditions we have, the number of input layer neurons should be equal to output layer neurons. Why? We are going to check whether both blue color and yellow color are same. Then it should have same number of neurons. Then the number of hidden layer neurons are always lesser than other layers. If you don't have a less number of neurons in the hidden layer, then it doesn't mean that you are going to reduce the data. Your objective is to minimize the size of the data. Then that objective may not be reached. These are some of the practical implementation concepts you should know if you are working with autoencoders. The internal layer corresponds to the code in the compressed form. The training algorithm is same as that of BPN. If you know the training algorithm of BPN, you can very well do process with autoencoders. These are some of the types I'm giving you. Under complete autoencoders, which is what I showed you in the previous example. We have also over complete autoencoders. When we say over complete autoencoders, the number of neurons in the hidden layer will be higher than your input layer. Then you can ask me, then how do we do the process of dimensionality reduction? Right? In that case, few neurons in that hidden layer will be always shut off. Right? We have a specific algorithm in such a way that few neurons will be always in the mute condition. So in any case, your hidden layer neurons is going to be less. We have also sparse encoders, autoencoders. You can see the gray color dots in this diagram. In this diagram, where it is going to be in the off state. Then you have the contractive autoencoders, where even if there is a small change in your input data, still you can get your best result that we have with the help of this diagram. This is the variational autoencoders which people normally use nowadays. Instead of taking a single value from the data, right, they take a probability curve. They go for a probability curve. So when you have a probability curve, you have an option of choosing anything between this curve instead of a single point, which is going to be much accurate. So when you look at the third diagram, instead of the single values, single representation, I'm going to have a distribution expression from which I can choose my specific values. And when you look at that encoder probability distribution, from that you can choose your own values for a better reconstruction. When you are having a single value, it may be rigid and you may not get the correct recognition of your input data. Remember, all the applications which we will be dealing with is all about pattern recognition. Don't forget. This is variational autoencoder's complete architecture. So if you look at the PowerPoint slide later, definitely you can go for implementation. If you know Python, it is very easy. So the second one is deep belief network. Again, it is also used for dimensionality reduction. And for knowing deep belief network, you must know the basic artificial neural network structure, which is called as recurrent Boltzmann machine. So recurrent Boltzmann machine will have an input layer and as an output layer. Now, when you look at this diagram, when I say RBM1, it will have one input layer and one output layer. When I say RBM2, the output layer of the RBM1 will act as input layer for RBM2. So I can say that deep belief network is the stack of or cascaded structure of recurrent restricted Boltzmann machines. Right? Each RBM has an input layer and an output layer. The hidden layer in stack 1 is the visible layer. Visible layer is nothing but the input layer for the stack. And interestingly, they have connections within RBM. Each layer within and one RBM is connected with each other. But when you say whether RBM, if you ask me whether RBM1 and RBM2 are connected, they are not physically connected. This diagram shows it is actually connected, but they are not physically connected, but one data will be transferred to the other layer. So when you keep on moving from a higher dimension to a lower dimension hidden layers, finally you are going to have a dimensionality reduction application. You can achieve that. Each RBM network is trained independently. And the third one is LSTM. The previous two methods which I talked about is going to be widely used for dimensionality reduction applications. Wherever mathematics is there, you can make use of that. And the third method is LSTM, long short-term memory networks. Right? So this network is mainly used for signal and text applications. If you're working in semantic analysis, or if you are doing application with text mining or data mining, then LSTM will be widely useful. So if you want to have a hint of what is LSTM is all about, Initially, we had the concept of recurrent neural networks, which is one of the basic, you can say, artificial neural network also. So recurrent neural networks is used to predict things based on the immediate previous history. That means what I'm going to do today, I'm going to decide, the machine is going to decide based on my yesterday's history. But to have more accuracy, I need the previous history of the past week also, right? But when I give all the past week's data, my recurrent neural networks fails. It can take a decision only based on the immediate past data. So the scientists or the researchers thought, why don't we go for an advanced form of recurrent neural networks? The resultant is LSTM, long short-term memory networks, where it can take approximately around 1 week or 2 weeks previous data, and then based on that data, it is going to predict the today's activities. It is going to be highly accurate in comparison with recurrent neural networks, right? So when you carefully observe all the three methods which I'm discussing, you can see that artificial neural network is there, some drawback is there. To overcome that, we went for this type of innovative stuffs, right? RNN is incapable of long-term dependencies. So this is a structure of LSTM. If you see, it is a repeating structure. A is the same module which is available within the internal block is available on both sides also. We have 3 layers. I will just brush up that. The one is called as the forget gate layer, where the previous history, all the data in the previous history may not be useful for prediction. So first I must decide which one should be used and which one should be blocked. For that, I make use of a sigmoidal activation function. Right? It is going to have a value 0 or 1. If it is 0, again, if you look at the diagram, I'm going to multiply with the top line of cell systems or cell stage. So when I multiply with 0, that data is going to be cut off. Only with all the data, all the input data X, for which an output of 1 is obtained, that alone will be passed for further processing. Again, from the data which I got, I'm going to add some more additional data, right? Or what are the changes I'm going to make so that my prediction will be much more easy. For that, we have a layer called as input layer. If you look at your input layer, again, it is a combination of the previous forget layer and the input layer, right? So the forget layer will tell you what data you should take, and if it is 1 or if it is allowed, then your input layer will say what modification you have to take or you have to make, right? Your tanh function will be between +1 and -1. It is never going to be 0. So you can take that value, and if you look at the second diagram, you will have plus symbol. You can add with the already existing cell state. This cell state is going to be the complete history, right? So some data is removed, now some data is added. And finally, you will have the output. Based on this history, you will going to have the output prediction, right? You can have the slides and you can have a clear-cut go-through of how you can go for implementation. Again, LSTM is also very easy to implement. The structure looks complex, but relatively, if you know Python, it is very easy to implement. Now we will come into the focal point of our session, which is deep convolutional neural network. This is one of the commonly used deep learning method. If you take any deep learning paper, you will see this deep convolutional neural network structure are used. So why should we go for CNN? So whenever you make use of a method, immediately ask yourself a question: why should I make use of CNN in my work? The first framed deep learning model is not CNN, right? It is another network called as deep feed-forward neural network. Deep feed-forward neural network. Shortly, we can call it as DFNN. It has a specific drawback. That's why CNN came into picture. So what is the drawback of DFNN? We will take the same case study of number recognition. So if you look at these numbers, anyone can tell the answer. You look at the first figure on my left-hand side, you can see the object as 8. The machine will correctly say it is an 8. Now, if you look at the second number, the machine will say correctly as 5. Well, DFNN works better, right? Now, when you look at the second set of images, the same 8 is given, but what happens? Your machine is saying it is not able to recognize. Again, when you are giving 5, Again, the machine is saying, I do not know what is that, right? How will it happen? It is it always. But the reality is your DFNN works well only when the region of interest, here the region of interest, the data, the digit is in the center of the image. But how can you expect all the time the data to be in the center of the image? So your DFNN fails in most of the cases. Right? That means DFNN is highly sensitive to the position of the digit. Underline the word position. Right? Position, position, position. CNN is all about position. Is sensitive to the position of the digit. Now you can ask me a question. I know, sir, nowadays many supercomputers are available. I will train my machine with 8 in all different positions. Very good. You do that. Absolutely no problem. But how many positions will you take? How many positions you have in an empty page? Right? Each inches correspond to one different position. Right? Even if you miss a small pixel, again, you are not going to get the results. Right? Additionally, instead of training with only one image, you are going to train with huge number of images, which is going to make, again, the machine more complex. Your time requirement will be too much. Right? So it doesn't make any sense. Then you can say, no, I have the advanced computers in my university where I can take everything within a second. But in whatever may be the reason, does it make any sense? Does it make any sense? A Jude should be Jude. Whether he is sitting or whether he is standing or whether he is walking, he should be always Jude. Right? I am able to recognize him. But if you go for a system which is not able to recognize, that should be definitely replaced. Right? So the solution for this position sensitivity of DFNN is convolution, not CNN, not convolution neural network. I am not going into the neural network now. It is the simple convolution process which will be useful to eliminate this position sensitivity nature of DFNN. Right? So you must know, what do you mean by convolution? Convolution neural network is there. In that, the first word is convolution. I'm sure most of you, maybe from ECE background at least, should be knowing about convolution. If you have studied signals and systems or any other thing, you should know about convolution. It's a mathematical operation. This is taken from Wikipedia. This is the only slide I have taken from Wikipedia. It's a mathematical operation on two functions. To produce a third function, you have to understand each and every word which I have underlined. That is typically viewed as a modified version of one of the original functions. That means I have two input data, A and B, where A is my original data, right? So when I do some convolution operation with another unknown data B, I am going to get a third data C, which is actually a modified version. What do you mean by modified version? Time variant version, right? So the convolution operation itself will do. I am not going to do anything on that. Convolution operation itself will generate a third output, which is going to be a modified version or time variant version of the original data. That is what I need. So if I include this convolution operation in a neural network, then what happens is, before going into the classification process, I will get different versions. If I do several convolution, I will get different versions of my original data. Then the system will be easy. System will be facing a much, will be feeling comfortable to deal with such type of large amount of data. And now we'll go into the concept of convolution. Remember, I have not yet gone into the details of CNN. You take a simple image, right? A child sitting on a duck in a park, right? Now a human being can say it is a child, but the machine can say this is a child only if it is in the middle of the image, right? So how convolution can be used for solving this problem? What we are going to do is, we are going to split this image or divide this image or data into different small pieces in such a way that the child's body part will be available in more than one tiles or one pieces, right? If you look at this image, you can understand. Now it's an original image, it's a whole image. Now I have converted into many small images. So if you can see, the body part of the child is seen at least in 9, 10, 12, around 15 or 16 or around 20 slides, we have the child's images. So instead of training the whole image, if I can do like this, if you take a single slide, the child's head is not in the center, right? But still the machine will be able to say that it is going to be a child, because it is going to deal with the different small pieces of my original image. So even if it is in a different position, it will be able to recognize. This is the concept of convolution, right? Each tile is saved as a separate image. When I say tile, the small splitting, right? So this image is divided into 77 small tiles. You can see that the child is available in more than one tiles. But you have to note down another point, not in all slides. Let that point I will come later. Underline the word not in all slides, but in more than one slide, which is relatively better instead of having a one child image. Now there is no necessity to train the network with new images where the child is in different position. Right? Even if there is a small piece of a child's body, because it is already trained with a human structure, it can say that it is going to be a child. In the divided image, the child is available in more than one position. Now we will come into the concept of convolutional neural network. So when you come into the concept of convolutional neural network, how do you split these images? That is what an engineer should do. How do you split these images? When you do this in connection with an artificial neural network, then the resultant is a convolutional neural network. It's not new. A normal neural network mixed with convolution. So it is a three-step process. The entire structure will look like this. Everybody knows this. But the problem is how to frame these concepts. That is what the people are struggling with. You have an input image. You have a convolution operation where you are going to divide your image into small pieces. Then we have a concept called as max pooling. Then finally, we come to our neural network only. Without ANN, it is very difficult to follow deep learning or really understand deep learning. But we have a critical issues here. These are the three commonly used processes. There are other small processes which I'm avoiding just to make sure that you understand in a better way, like dropout, regularization layer. So many stuffs are available. But if you have this, you can have a basic convolutional architecture. How many convolution layers should I use? As I told you, deep learning will have more number of layers. Now this convolution is also treated as a layer. Max pooling is also a layer. But how many layers should I use in my architecture? Still, it is an open research problem. Randomly, different sets are people are doing a different architecture with different combinations of convolution and max pooling. If you can find something on that, it will be very useful to the community. How to achieve step one? First, we will see when you have an input image, we are going to give it to the convolution process where it is going to split the images. So this is a dog image. What we see, human beings see an image of a dog, but computers never see an analog data. It see only numbers. That's why in artificial neural network, you convert your image into numbers with the help of feature extraction. This is what computers are going to see. So what we are also going to do is, we are also going to play with numbers and determine the convolution output. So let us assume an input of size 32 cross 32 cross 3, right? This 3 corresponds to a color image, or you can say an RGB image. Now you assume that you are going to search something in this image, right? You assume that you are going to search something in this image, maybe a dog. So you assume you are going to be left in a dark room, right? So in a dark room, if you want to search something, what will you do? You will take a torchlight and a flashlight, and you will switch it on and show it in some portion of the room, right? So depending upon the portion which you are pointing the torchlight to, that portion alone will be visible. Or I can say in other words, that portion is taken as an output. If you are not able to find your object, what will you do? Now you will again change your torchlight to another position. So now that position will be visible. that can be taken as another image. Right? Likewise, when you move on your torchlight in the complete dark room, you are going to get small portions depending on the size of the torchlight. If your torchlight is big enough, a big image. If it is small enough, it is a small portion. So your torchlight or flashlight can be called as a filter, right? So I told you about the convolution. How many input data for convolution? One is your original image and other one is your unknown data, right? That unknown data is nothing but the filter. You randomly choose any filter whose size is going to be very much lesser than your original image. If I'm having a 32 cross 32 cross 3 for original image, my size of my filter is going to be only 5 cross 5 or sometimes 3 cross 3. Depending upon your choice, you can make use of. Now, what you are going to do is, a filter is also an array of number. You will also have some values like what I'm showing here. An image will have some numbers. The filter also will have some numbers. Now, what you are going to do is, you are going to overlap your filter over a small portion of your image in the first corner. So when it is a 5 cross 5 matrix, it is going to get overlapped with the 5 cross 5 matrix of the original image. So that original image 5 cross 5 matrix will also have number. This 5 cross 5 matrix also will have a number. Each number will be multiplied, and when they are summed up, you will get a single number. Now again, what should you do? You move on your filter. How you are going to move your torchlight throughout your room? In the same way, move your filter throughout the various locations of your image. So each time, if you are moving 100 times, 100 numbers you will get. Right? Say for example, if there are 784 possible locations, 5 cross 5 into 784 gives you the total size of your image. Then you will get 784 single numbers, which can be again converted into a two-dimensional array of size 28 cross 28, which is also a small image. Now, can you correlate with the child diagram? I told you theoretically, a child is divided into small images. How do you get the small image? Take a mask, take a filter, multiply with your original image, get a number, change the positions, get different numbers, put them into a two-dimensional array, you will get a single image, right? Now, to get another image, what you should do? You should go for, this is an example. To get another image, what you should do is, you should go for taking another torchlight. So if you use different types of torchlight, the probability of finding the object will be high. In the same way, we can use different filters, and when we use different filters, you can get different angle and different position sensitive images. This is the way, mathematical way, how the overlapping is done. You see a blue color on my left hand side, which is the original image, where we have many numbers, pixel values. Now, when you take a filter, you take a simple example, the red color, second column corresponds to a filter whose size is 3 cross 3. So when I'm overlapping, I'm multiplying with 0 into 1, plus 1 into 1, plus 0 into 1. Likewise, I'm going to do that. And finally, I'm going to get a single number. Likewise, when I move this red color throughout that entire image, I will get a 3 cross 3 matrix, which is on the extreme right side of my screen, where you have the first green color shaded matrix. Right. In the same way, you can have a complete set when you go for many filters. So this is how an image will look like, right? A child image. The child image is nothing but, here I'm gonna car image, right? And on my right hand side, if you look at that, you can find the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 small blocks, right? Each block corresponds to a small image. How do we get that image? With the convolution operation of an original data overlapping with the filter or a mask, right? So when you look at that image, it is very dull. It is not a clear image, right? But you can see shades, some dark lines, something you can get, but not the complete stuff. This is the output of the first convolution layer in the convolutional neural network. Your image is divided into small images. Now, each 28 cross 28 matrix, when I say 28 cross 28 matrix, the first rectangle, a box, on the 10 set of images, right? Is called as a feature descriptor. Now, can you get an analogy with the first information I gave you in the introduction section? A feature extraction is done by itself. There is no manual feature extraction. So when a feature extraction is done by itself, this convolution is responsible for the feature extraction. Or in other words, you can say convolution layer does the process of feature extraction. Now you look at this diagram. Can you identify what is this object I'm talking about? On my first pixel representation of filter, I'm showing the original image. I'm not showing the, sorry, this is the mask. The pixel representation of filter, this is the mask. I'm not showing the original image. When I multiply this with my original image, I'm getting an object. If you carefully observe, wherever you have 30, that shades would have come as an output in my image. Now, can you tell me what is this? No, you will not be able to say, because this is an output of the first convolution layer, low level features, right? Low level features. Actually, I'm talking about a mouse. So when you are lighting your flashlight, when you are showing at a room, this specific portion of the mouse is visible to you. So what you have to do, when you slowly move further, you can find all the features correctly, or small portions will be visible to you. Now, when this output of the convolution layer is given to another convolution layer, both the output will get joined. So you will get a curve, then the nose part, then the tail part. So when you have more number of convolution layers, all the objects will be clearly visible. So for the current slide, you can say this line or curve or edge is called as low level features. Right? So now we cannot detect the objects with this low level features, right? So to get a higher level feature, when I say higher level feature, you take a small wooden cardboard box, right? Cardboard box will have some vertical lines. With vertical line, chair also will have a vertical line, right? So only when they are connected with each other, you can identify that this is a cardboard box or this is a chair. This is how our brain works, right? So these are called as higher level features. To get higher level features, you must have more convolution layers. Only if you have more convolution layers, what I told you in the first introduction section, accuracy will be more, right? Accuracy will be more. Only if you have more higher level features, you will be able to identify the object. This is the validation for the 2 points which I discussed in the introduction section. More layers, more accuracy, because one layer is going to give only a low level feature. More layers, more higher level features, you can get more accuracy. And the feature extraction is done by the convolution layer. So it will be hard to visualize the output of third, fourth, fifth convolution. When the people write research papers, they never ever give the intermediate results, which is another drawback of the people, right? You should give intermediate results. Try to visualize. You have many data visualization tools available. Try to take the output of the in-between layer. They use some inbuilt software. They just run, they get the graph or whatever it may be without knowing what is actually that. So if you are giving some intermediate results, I'm very sure your paper is going to be accepted in a very good side journal. So examples for high level features, a square, a semicircle, these are high level features from where we can detect it. The second step is the max pooling layer, right? As I told you in the child sitting in the duck diagram, I told you the child's body part is not seen in all the slices. Do you remember that? Right? It is not present in all the tiles, right? That means all the tiles are not necessary for your processing. Even though I split into convolution layers, split into many small sub-images, all sub-data are not necessary for further processing. So what I can do is, I can do a downsampling to remove all the pieces which are not necessary. So how do I find that mathematically? When you do a convolution process, in my first diagram value is 6,600. Just observe the rectangle box, 6,600. And the second one is only 0. When you get a value of 0, it means that portion does not have any useful information. You are showing the torchlight in the wrong direction in your room, right? So what you can do is you can go for a downsampling. How do you downsample? In the previous car image, I show you 10 sub-images. Now you arrange 4 sub-images in a quadrant. And among that 4, whichever is going to give you the highest possible value in convolution operation, that alone can be chosen and select for processing. In that way, you are going to reduce 3 out of 4, or you are going to select only 1 from 4. But again, that is not a hard and fast rule. You can say out of 9, I'm going to choose 1. It is up to the user. But some downsampling should be done. And the step 3 is your fully connected layer, which I'm not going to go into detail because it is all about your artificial neural network. So artificial neural network requires the training as usual. This is a training methods. Maybe I can skip this. I will just tell the theoretical part of the training. So what happens in convolution neural network is why I'm just giving emphasis on training is this is another feature which is not seen in the research papers. They just skip the training part because it is going to be highly mathematical in nature. So they do not see the internal things and they draw the diagram, give the graph, and they wind up. Again, your research paper may not get accepted. So when you go for your forward pass, you have a forward pass and a reverse pass, as like in your artificial neural network. First, the parameters should be adjusted as filter parameters, which can be also called as weights, which are randomly initialized. Now, using these filters, you have your input image. You can go for your convolution layers output. Depending upon the filter mask, you will get different outputs. You can have different convolution layers so that you can get a higher level feature. And finally, you come to your fully connected layer, which again, your normal process will take place. But the only difference is the type of activation function which we use. In normal neural network, we go for sigmoidal, but here we may go for a function called as RELU. Or in the output layer, we go for soft. But make much difference, but it will reduce the complexity to some extent. Then you have the error value determination. And this error value is again passed back in the reverse direction to adjust your fully connected layer weights first, and then you can adjust the weights of the filter matrix. Right? So I'm not going into the details of that. A very good book is available, written by the lady researcher Lauren Fawcett. You can refer that, or you can refer some of my videos also, which have given talks in other institutions. It is also available specifically on gradient descent algorithm. You can refer that also. So this process will keep on continuing till your output is equal to target. Once the network is trained, it can be used for any data. So this is a mathematical example. You can refer this later. For want of time, I'll be skipping this. I have only 20 minutes more, right? This is a simple. This is what deep understanding is necessary. Deep learning is not just data. It is all about mathematics. It is a mixture of mathematics, biology, and computer science. If you know these 3 things, then you can just play with deep learning. So these are some of the steps, how data is coming from the reverse direction, dou L by dou O, partial differentiation. Differentiation is an important aspect when you go for training, because only a differentiable value will lead to a value of 0. Our objective is to make error is equal to 0. How do we make a constant value equal to 0? Only by differentiation. That's why wherever you have training process, you will have derivatives or differentiations. Right? You just go through these slides. If you have any doubts, you can ask me at any point of time. And this equation, you will not see this equation in most of the research papers. Right? This is the formula to update the filter parameters. F updated is equal to F minus alpha is the learning rate, dou L by dou F. The loss function with respect to your filter parameters should be estimated. If you can include all these equations in your paper, it will be much impressive in the eyes of the editors and the reviewers. So finally speaking, your convolution layer, whether it is in a forward pass or in the reverse pass, they are somewhat equivalent to the normal convolution operation only. So this is a sample code which you can have. This is written in Python, but there is no specific language you should use for deep learning. There is no hard and fast rule like that. If you are good in Python, you make use of Python. If you are good in MATLAB, you can make use of MATLAB. I think in 2018 version or in 2019 version, we have the setup for deep learning toolboxes also. You can make use of that. But when you write a research paper, understand that, give in-depth details and write your research paper. That is the main objective of myself talking for this 1.5 hours. Right? This is a Python language where you are going to give the filter size, your kernel size 1. I'm using 2 filters, so that dimension should be given. It's a border mode. Border mode in the sense, when you fix your pixel with your original image, when you fix your filter with your original image, sometimes they may not be exactly matching. If P cross 3 9, that means your original image pixel should be divisible by 9. If not, you are going to add some zeros to make sure that it is completely fixed. That for that we go for border mode. As I told you, you can go for ReLU function. So all the process which I told you now will be done by a single function which is in the 5th line, convolution 2D. Because this is a 2D process, we can go for that. 3D operation is also there, right? 3D operation is also there. 3D conversion image network is there, where you can make use of same process, but a higher complexity will be there. Then max pooling we have. Then dropout is the one thing which is used to improve the performance. There is a process called as overfitting. If there are more amount of noises, then again that is not good. So we reduce some of the neurons, which is called as dropout. And again flatten. Flatten is the output of the max pooling layer, which will be a 2-dimensional one. But when you want to give to a single artificial neural network, it should be again converted to a single layer. So that will be converted into a single dimensional one for using this flatten command. So everything, and finally you come to the training part, where the algorithm I'm using is ADA Delta. There is an ADAM algorithm. Many different types of algorithms are there. You can choose anything, and that will give you the results. But the internal details is what I have discussed in the previous slides. So this is how a complete convolution neural network will look like, right? The red color box is called as feature extraction. If you can correlate with the first block diagram I showed you, input image, pre-processing is not shown here, feature extraction and classification. Same thing is here, but what happens? There is no manual feature extraction. My convolution layer and max pooling layer, this combination is going to give me the features necessary for the classification process. When you go for the blue color box, it is the classification which has to be again done by a fully connected layer, a fully connected neural network only. So without knowing the blue box, coming to deep learning is not that wise decision. So these are some of the combinations of networks available. You can refer this website where you can find more and more details on that. Deep learning this book is not exactly available, but there are many blogs, right? You can browse through the website where you can get interesting information. Softwares, Python can be used, MATLAB can be used. And if you have a good advanced computer, that will be always better. But still, if you have a sufficient RAM capacity system, I think still you can do that. Now, this is all about your convolution neural networks. Now, next we're going to the next module of deep learning. This is what people normally use nowadays, which we call it as transfer learning. So human beings always have the capability of transferring knowledge from one task, one domain to another task, another domain. When I say task, it is an action. When I say task, it's an action. When I say domain, it is a data, or the process where you are working. A classification of medical data. Here, classification is the task, medical data is the domain. So best example is, if you know cycle riding, you will learn how to ride a car, right? That is true. Riding is the same task. Task is same, but the domain, if you see, first it is a unmotorized domain, cycle. There is no motor. But when you go for a car, it is a motorized domain, but still you are going to transfer some knowledge from cycle riding to car riding. So you are making it much more easier for you. So when you take these four task and domain, you can have 4 different possibilities. Same task, same domain. Anyone will do. Human being will do, machine also will do. Absolutely no problem, right? That means writing an English essay, writing an English poem. Writing is the same task. English poem or essay doesn't make any difference. That is fine. When you come to the last one, different task, different domain. Absolutely, there is no necessity for transfer of knowledge. You say, for example, I am taking bath. I am riding a car. Bathing is another exercise or another task. Riding is another. All are independent. There's no need for transfer. So leave out A and D. The 2 things which you have to concentrate is same task, different domain. Different task, same domain. In the sense, can I transfer some knowledge if I'm using the same process so that my deep learning computational complexity will come down? Right? Or is it easier for processing? Because when you see in the previous slides, the training is slightly complex. You need to adjust the weights along with the filter parameters. But if I know some knowledge about the previous process, once if I do that, for the second time, can I take some stuff from there? Can a machine do that? Human beings are able to do, but can a machine do that? That is the concept of transfer learning. This is an example for same task, different domain. When you say same task, it is all about classification. Here I am classifying or categorizing into 2 sets of data, data set A and data set B. But when you look at the output categorization, you can see different domain present in the same class. One is the shape, one is the digit. If you look at the first category, I have the circle shape and also with the number 5. On the other hand, the triangle with the 5. That means, right, classification of these 2 are same. But when you look at your output, different types of data are in the same class. When you go for different tasks, same domain, right? Same domain means now the database is going to be same. In the previous example, I have given both shapes and digits. Now I'm going to use the same domain, same data, right? Only image faces. But the beauty is when you look at the different tasks, the names, the outputs of each face is going to be different, which is exactly opposite to the first one. Different shapes in the same category, but different faces given different names, right? Vladimir, Lionel Messi, Angela Merkel, Barack Obama, everyone are there, right? But they are having the same face. Now, my question is, if I can recognize Vladimir Putin, I am able to recognize Lionel Messi. Can a machine do that? Or should I again start from the scratch to train it with Lionel Messi? Right? That is the question, or that is the concept of transfer learning. We will see how CNN does that. Human beings can do that options. Can the deep learning approach do? Right? Most of the supervised deep learning models such as CNN, which we saw earlier, require large amount of data, which may not be practically available. Right? This, once you train a machine, right, the more number of data, the more accuracy you are going to take. But all applications will not have that. Also, most deep learning models are specialized to a specific domain or a specific task. Either it may be classification or it may be an image processing stuff. Right? In CNN, which we learned earlier, it is for a computer vision group researchers. CNN works well with images. Right? That's why I gave you all the information about images. Right? There is also 1D CNN where signals can be also used, but predominantly it is used for computer vision or image processing group. Right? As far as a human being is there, as far as a human being has eyes, right? Deep learning and image processing cannot be separated. Right? For a human being, 83% of the data to his brain is via his eyes. You can sleep with your ears closed, ears open. Can you sleep with your eyes open? Absolutely not possible. That's why God has given a shutter to close our eyes, to cut off the supply to the brain via your eyes. Right? So eyes are very, very important. Wherever you have eyes, images will be there. So when you're trying to build an artificial machine, he also will have some images. So deep learning and images, 99% they are going to get correlated with each other. So whenever you have a data, if you can convert into a photograph or an image of anything of that sort, it will be easier for processing with CNN. So now what I'm going to say is, can we say that these 2 points, are the drawbacks of CNN. Right? Large amount of data requirement, and also they are used mainly for a predominant group. Someone from another data, a weather prediction specialist, he cannot use this. Right? So what is the drawback for that? Can we develop some other methods to avoid that? The answer is your transfer learning. So you look at these two diagrams. The first diagram on my left hand side, you can see the data set size. I'm doing one process first. I'm riding a cycle first. Then the second time I am riding a car. But when it's a normal method, I need the data set that the riding a cycle will take the same time as learning how to ride a car. The data set is going to be of same size, same circle size. Okay? But when you come to transfer learning, first I'm riding my cycle, data set 1. Look at the picture on my right hand side, data set 1. But when I'm going to ride a car, what happens to the data set circle size? It is reduced. That means when you want to classify your lung images, right? Once you train your method, that specific parameters can be extracted and can be used for classifying your brain image also, because lung and brain comes under the category of medical images. This way, you can reduce your training complexity of CNN to some extent. This concept is called as transfer learning. You are taking some knowledge from the already trained structure. You train it for once. You should train for once. But if you train for once, you can use the same thing for other images or other data or other classification tasks which are similar to what you have done now. So what is this knowledge? This knowledge is all about your features, weights, what to transfer. Try to identify which is source specific and which is common to source and target. You cannot train a machine. You cannot use a machine which is trained for identifying a car and then use it for a medical image. Car is completely different from medical image. The same mistake many people do now in the research papers. They take ResNet and they use one-time signal and the other time another numerical data, which is again wrong. Right? So only if you have a similar type of images. If you look at the pre-trained model, they would have given the specifications. Go through the specifications. If it is for images, you make use of an image. Don't use a signal or any other text data. Features from a car may not be suitable for a brain. So the same process, and we have many pre-trained models available for transfer learning. You would have definitely come across these words if you have used deep learning in your research works. VGG16, VGG19, Inception V3, Exception, ResNet, DeepNet, MobileNet, GoogleNet, plenty of stuffs are available, right? But the specialty is they are pre-trained models. That means the filter parameters are already trained. So that will work for VGG16. Say for example, it will work for any medical images. So you just give the images, your filter parameters need not be adjusted. Only change your fully connected layer based on your application, the number of output layer neurons, and you can take your specification about VGG16. And I told you in the first slide one problem I gave you, right? It is very difficult to judge the number of max pooling and convolution layers. And these people who framed this VGG16, they have fixed it, right? You have only 16 layers, and there is a combination of convolution and pooling layers. And in the same way, VGG19, I will tell you, this training process of pre-trained model took around weeks, 2 weeks or 3 weeks for training itself, which is very, very complex. So the more number of layers, complexity is there, but you can have more accuracy. Now we'll come to the last part. I have only 5 to 10 minutes time. Applications of DL and transfer learning towards COVID-19. And myself, along with my collaborators from outside India, have published papers in the area of COVID-19. And there are some collaborators from New Delhi. I thank them for allowing me to show the results. And recently it got published, so there's no issues. There will not be any copyright issues. I am confidently showing to you. This is the way how you can do that if you want to go for COVID-19 research. So on the input data, you can see X-ray and CT images, right? So once my network is trained with X-ray images, definitely CT lung images is easy for processing. So feature maps. Who will give me the feature maps? Is it Jude? No. The convolution layer. This is a convolution pre-trained model. That layer will give me the feature maps, which is a fixed one. I need not adjust it. And then the vectorized feature map, that is two-dimensional, is converted into a single dimension, is given to BGG16, inception V2, and decision tree is not a deep learning model. BGG16, inception V2, and you can get the results, and you can classify easily whether it is a normal or a COVID-19 or a pneumonia image. So image database, the first question people ask is, sir, I am also interested. From where do we get the database? Plenty of images are available. It is almost going to be 1 year since the outbreak of COVID-19. So doctors and many people have uploaded the images. These are the specifications. You have also images in the area of COVID-19 and SARS, right? So if you look at these images, COVID-19 and pneumonia, for a human being, for an ordinary human being, it is very difficult. Even it is very difficult for the doctors to classify which category that person belongs to, whether he is suffering from normal pneumonia or whether he is suffering from COVID-19. That white patches is going to make a difference. So some automated systems, if deep learning can tell accurately, if it can extract the features and then classify and tell this is pneumonia, this is COVID-19, it will be very good for the human society. Okay? So these are some of the specifications which we have used. We have used Python with Keras, and the iterations, the batch size means the number of images and the depth of the images. So whenever you analyze a system, you must have these performance measures. I hope you would have got this information from the previous speakers: precision, recall, accuracy, sense specificity. So deep learning, based on the output of deep learning, you can estimate these performance measures. So the theoretical part and the mathematical part I have discussed earlier. Now this is only the experimental part where I'm showing you the results. So when you observe this pneumonia versus COVID-19, the result is slightly lesser. The reason is normal is widely different from COVID-19, but there will be highly matching criteria between pneumonia and COVID-19. That's why the results slowly come down. So logically also your answer should be correct. You cannot write a program and say that milk is black in color. Nobody will accept that. So if I say normal versus COVID-19 is going to give me a lesser value, the researchers will not accept because it is logically wrong. Right? So your experimental results should be logically correct also. These are some of the graphs which shows the training loss. The training process takes place in an iterative fashion, and each time, as I told you, your error should come to 0. And this is another graph. And this is another model result. And here I want to pinpoint to one drawback in the results which we got. That's why specifically I have this slide here. A precision of 1 is never possible. Do not have any results saying 100% are completely successful. It's not going to be possible. Efficiency can never be equal to 100%. Noise cannot be completely eliminated from a data. So avoid such superficial results, which may again be one of the reasons for the rejection of your research manuscript. When you go for Python, you will get all these plots and graphs, but when you write your results should be well augmented with discussions and inferences. Okay? Why this happens? Why not this happen? That should be the thing in which your research should be carried out. That is the expectation of an editor and a researcher, reviewer. So these are another database available, plenty of database available. Here they have given the difference between bacterial pneumonia and viral pneumonia also, right? Many images are there. These are some of the confusion matrix are the results. This is a custom model. Custom model in the sense we have made the results. It is not given by anyone else. We have fixed the number of layers based on our idea. We did that, but if you look at that, the result is very less in comparison to the pre-trained models. BGG19, you will have a confusion matrix. It's only a bi-level classification, but I will advise you, you can go for a multi-level classification, which is the need of the hour. So 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, not at all preferable. So another possible work which you can do is with another CT images, where you can see the 4,000 COVID images available in the website. I think the slide will be with the organizers, and my video along with my talk is also there. So you can come back and check that, absolutely no problem. This is another type of research going on now, predicting the outbreaks. How many cases will be there in Coimbatore city next month. Right? But you should be very accurate in your model, because when I submit my paper now, the paper will reach the reviewer probably next month. Then he will know the live situation. If your model answer and the real-time answer is wrong, then absolutely it is going to be it's going to backfire for you, right? So high chances of the journal trying to replicate your paper, and exact match should be done for your prediction. So these type of researches are also going on, because nowadays people are getting highly confused whether it is going to be increased or decreased. But more research papers are being accepted in the diagnostic criteria, the one which I showed you earlier. But if you want, if you are away from computer science background, you can do this also, maybe relatively easier. Now the last segment, few open research problems for you. Can you find something equivalent to convolution for a feature extraction? One student just shook the entire AI community with his deep learning work, right? One professor did that. Can we do that? Convolution does feature extraction automatically. Instead of convolution, can we make another process which can extract the features automatically? How do you fix the number of layers in any custom model? If it is a pre-trained model, then it's fine. But when you go for custom model, you need to fix the number of layers. What combination, what permutation? How do you place the jigsaw puzzles to make sure your accuracy is high? That is another research problem. When executing more images, what happens to computational complexity? This is the area in which I am working on now, right? Deep learning always talks about accuracy, but what happens to the complexity? If you go to a scan, to take a scan for some serious injuries in your head, right? Or if you're some relatives one, if they tell you, go and come back after 24 hours, like how they talk in the movies, come back after 24 hours. How will you feel for all the 24 hours one day? Right? The trauma will be huge. So how can we reduce the computational complexity? Some of my artificial neural network algorithms are being executed in some radiology centers in Madurai. Right? So they face a problem. So Jude, can we still reduce the computational complexity? So you can think about that. And people now started asking, what is your contribution in the model? Don't take simply ResNet, do some imaging, do some process and give. What is your contribution? That is very, very important. Is an accuracy of 100% possible? Again, the question is, does it depends on the size of the data set or types of data set? Right? That is also another question. Two persons may be running in a race. If you ask the first person, they say, I came second. Right? But actually only two persons ran the race. Then you cannot say that it is going to be 100%. He's going to be successful. Right? So how many images you are going to test with? That makes another. So this is my last slide. My first slide will be always my self-evaluation tool, and this is a warning for people who are deep into that. You will get attracted towards it easily and get into that. I got attracted, and now I am into that pool. But always in your back of mind, you have to understand that it is extremely dangerous for human beings, right? Artificial intelligence, the broader umbrella is all about making artificial human beings. They may get a chance. They are exact human beings. They will feel thirsty. They will feel hungry. They can also reproduce. An entire generation or a race may come in the earth. And at that time, we will become slaves. They will become masters. Late Stephen Hawking always says, always have a plan B if you deploy AI in real-time applications. But you need not worry for these small chota bachas, right? These are very small stuffs which we are doing now. In 1990, when AI was very attractive in India, right? People said that in another 30 years' time, in 2020, we will be in another world. Nothing happened. Still, we are talking about recognizing a cat and a dog only, right? So there are two types of AI. One is called as general AI. The other one is called as narrow AI. Narrow AI is what we are doing. We are doing in bits and pieces. But general AI is the one which is the ultimate objective, where we can get an artificial human being. All these bits and pieces of works should go there and make a machine. I do not know whether it is possible or not, but scientists and researchers say that it is possible. Right? So only God knows maybe whether we will be still alive to see that such things, we do not know. So thank you very much. exactly 1.5 hours, maybe another 10 minutes, I think, before the next session. This is my email ID. This is my phone and WhatsApp number. You can contact me at any point of time. If I am unable to give you the solution, I will show you the way from where you can get a solution. This is my web page. You can go there. You can look at my collaborative research works and other details also. And this is my book depository where I have published 37 books, mostly with machine learning and deep learning and pattern recognition applications. You may get more contents when you go into that. Thank you. It is not about talking, it is all about listening. So thank you very much for your patience listening. Thank you very much. Now we can have a small question and answer session.
Sir, thank you for your wonderful session, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Really, it was a insightful session, sir. We could unearth some mystery of deep learning here. Participants, please, do you have any queries? You can unmute yourself and speak, or you can post in chat.
Thank you, Professor Imtiaz. Thank you, Professor Abdul. You can just come to the, you can unmute your mic and come and ask your queries instead of typing that. Text data is very, very difficult to understand, right? If you talk orally, that will be much more better. So if you can come live, it will be very good for discussion.
Sir, hello. Hello, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Hello, myself Imtiaz, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, that is in programming side, sir defined that is kernel type also there, no?
Kernel is nothing but a filter.
Okay.
Kernel.
So that which? Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So if you are outside the environment of computer science, there are many words which are used in a mutually exclusive manner. Kernel, filter, mask, everything corresponds to the small matrix, right? 5x5 or a 3x3 matrix. But the size should be defined, and how many filters, that also should be defined.
Okay. So did Python or MATLAB, that is more number of libraries according to the AI?
Python is better. When you go for your deep learning based stuff, Python is better because we have Keras, we have TensorFlow, we have additional libraries like plotting libraries with MATLAB, and many NumPy is there dealing with arrays. Everything is there. But MATLAB is also possible. One of my research scholar, she says that she is comfortable with MATLAB. So I told her, you proceed with MATLAB, and she has taken good results, and even intermediate results she has taken. So I think it should be fine, but depends upon your convenience, you can choose. See, the thing is, your programming tool is only about the plate in which we keep the food and eat, right? In the plate, you keep rice and eat. In the plate, you keep noodles and eat. In the plate, you keep chapati and eat. It is all important is what you are going to eat, not the plate. So if you're convenient with the banana leaf, you eat with that. Absolutely no. But Python is better if you are a newcomer.
Okay. Thank you. Very informative session, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Imtiaz. Don't restrict yourself with questions and doubts. You can ask. Sometimes it may be wrong also, but that's fine. That is way how we should learn and grow.
Hello, sir. This is Swati here.
Yes,
and
madam.
I just want to know regarding your last slide where you spoke about how AI is going to be, So I just want to know about the weak AI and the strong AI. Is it that the deep learning and the ANN corresponds to strong AI? Is it that way? How would you correlate between the weak AI and the strong AI in terms of these, deep learning, machine learning, or ANN?
Yeah. When you say deep learning and machine learning, I will say 80% they are going into the concept of weak AI, right? Because I told you the hierarchy. Artificial intelligence has many subdivisions. One subdivision is machine learning. Under machine learning, we have artificial neural network. Under that, we have deep learning. So a machine need not be only trained or learned using machine learning. It also has other aspects like computer vision, the way in which it is going to see, the natural language processing, the text data, the robotics part, the manufacturing part. So everything put together, we call it as AI. So for your question, I should say 80% what we are learning now with deep learning and machine learning is about weak AI. Yes,
Everything is
but
under
in
weak AI,
future,
right?
interesting researchers can merge robotics, NLP, or computer vision with these stuffs and make a complete machine. So when you look at the final machine, it's like our what to say, a small part of a human body. Your deep learning may be a small part of the complete artificial.
So, what would be your idea of a strong AI? Can you give us an example in a layman's language? What's your idea of an AI? What a strong AI should be capable of doing?
Okay. Yeah, you can take an example. Two persons are drowning in the river, right? Two persons are drowning in the river. So when I go there, when I know swimming as a human being, I try to save both, right? But when I have an artificial human being, right? When I have an artificial human being, he can go there and look for chances on his own with his own decision making. Who has the higher chance of probability of survival, right? He can, if he is about to pick both, he may lose both, right? That is my idea. I do not want anybody to lose. So what I may do is I may try to pick both, but I may lose both. But that machine, which is going to be intelligent and own decision making, it may take a decision on seeing the condition of immediately with the help of its computer vision and say that, okay, this person is going to have a higher probability of survival, right? Your deep learning can be used for prediction, and then he picks one person. This may happen in the future, but nobody knows. But as a human being, when you try to save someone, you will try to save all the people. But the
Is it
machines,
quite similar to the self-driven cars which Tesla is trying these days?
yeah, self-driven cars may be one of the specific application, right? It can be, its function will be limited. So when it wants to have the clutch, or when it wants to press the brake, or when it wants to accelerate, stop in this. So you have
Is
only
it
10,
your
10.
version of strong AI?
Yes, yes, 10 operations may be there. But when we talk about artificial human being, infinite number of operations. Infinite number of operations. All the operations which a human being can do must be done by that machine also.
All right. Thank you
So
so
now
much,
you
sir.
can see in Facebook, Elon Musk, he talks about Neuralink.
Yes.
These are some of the smallest steps in developing that general AI that I do not know whether it will be really feasible or not, but steps are being taken for that.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for your
Thank you.
informative set.
Thank you, Dr. Swati.
Hello, sir.
Yes, yes,
Hello,
Dr.
sir. This
Prashanti.
is Prashant
Yes, yes,
from
yes.
RBI Readiness. So, can you give me an example for reinforcement learning?
Okay, reinforcement learning. We have three types of learning. One is called as supervised learning. The other one is unsupervised learning. And the third one is called as reinforcement learning. What we saw now is a supervised learning where we have a target vector. Wherever you have error, you will have the concept of target vector. That means you have a predefined output, right? You have a predefined output, and when still your process reach that output, you will train that comes in the category of supervised. When you go for unsupervised training, you do not have any target, so the accuracy will be usually low. When you go for reinforcement learning, the target will not be given directly. Say for example, I am teaching my child about mathematics addition. I am teaching him 3 plus 2 is equal to 5 and all those stuffs. Then when I ask him what is 8 plus 7, 8 plus 7, the answer is 15. That is the correct answer. But I am not going to give that correct answer to him. I am not going to give the target to him. I will ask him what is 8 plus 7 and he will say 13 pa. Then I will say, no, you are wrong. Right? I am going to give a feedback. I am going to give him a feedback in the sense that he will correct himself. Then I will say, you are close to 15. Then he will say 8 plus 7 is 6. Then I will give a negative feedback saying that you are far away from the correct answer. Right? So reinforcement learning is an operation where the target is not directly given, but instead some feedback is given when each step when they go and find the correct answer. Normally it is used for like applications like traveling salesman problem, where the shortest path need to be found out. Each time when you train, you will get a positive feedback or a negative feedback. When you know you are getting a positive feedback, when you move in that direction, you will come to the target will not be given explicitly. Did I answer you, Dr. Prashanti?
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
The child example is the best example, where you are going to give some feedback to them, not giving the exact answer.
Yes.
Hello?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Surya Prakash. Tell me.
Sir, I'm a research scholar, and presently I'm working on this deep learning on image processing. So,
Okay.
as you said, the transfer, I'm working on this transfer learning itself. So,
Okay.
can I use this transfer learning for image noise classification?
Image noise classification.
Yes, sir. Means
Do you
identification.
mean to say noise removal from images or
Noise
image
identification. First of all, we need to identify the noise, and then we
Yeah.
will go.
Okay, if you say in that way, yeah, that is possible, right? That is possible. You having different types of images with different noises within them,
Yes, sir.
right? With
Yes, sir.
different noises within them. So that is possible with this type of pre-trained models, but you cannot go for denoising. For
So
denoising, that is
denoising, I will use another network, but noise
autoencoders you can use. But for yes, you can use. You can make use of this. No problem. Any pattern recognition. Yeah.
Can I convert this classification network into regression network?
For what? The
For
question
this
is,
denoise.
no, what's necessity for regression network? When you say regression, your answer should be in the form of a number, right?
Oh.
You are giving regression is a different application. Classification is another different application.
Okay.
So supervised models can do classification and can do regression. But I do not know why you should mix your classification. You need the noises when you types of noises, and then you go for denoising, right? Denoising, you can use other models. I do not know what's the necessity for going for regression models. Regression is like curve fitting process or applications like our online purchase is a best example for regression, right? How many products you are going to purchase, predicting that such stuffs, they can make use of regression. I don't think classification can be converted into regression.
And one more doubt, sir. So as you mentioned in your last but not slide, that when you are using this pre-trained networks, the publisher or editor may ask what is your contribution.
Yes,
so,
yes.
How can we change that? Because that pre-trained network, we are directly trying with our images and we'll get the result.
Okay. One idea or one advice I can give you is, it's a very interesting question. One advice I can give is, you can go for hybrid models, right? So what you can do is, in the pre-trained model, you can take your features in the convolution network, right? Your convolution layers features you can take, and you can mix it with another classifier like LSTM or generative adversarial networks. You can mix two methods.
Okay.
Right? That hybrid models is a bit complex, but you can do that. Okay. Or you can remove a normal convolution network with, you can put another machine learning approach also. That means convolution is taking the features and giving to you classifier. In that way also you can proceed. Okay. Try to mix one after another, maybe one other, then the second one first, the first one second. You can mix and match between the hybrid models.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Prashanti, tell me.
Sir, can you give How do we design our own machine learning algorithm? Can you
Can you
suggest
repeat your
any?
question? Can you repeat your question?
How do we design our own machine learning algorithm?
Oh, when you say machine learning in a common way, right? If you are a researcher and going into machine learning, there are many types of machine learning approaches. Statistical methods are there, probabilistic methods are there. But I
Can we design our own regression model? Already we
yes,
have a regression model.
yes, you can design your own regression model, right? But I will advise you some bit of artificial neural networks or deep learning should come inside your regression model, right? Regression is one of the application of supervised learning. So any supervised ANN or deep learning you can use. The reason why I'm saying is nowadays the expectation from a research arena, maybe a journal or a project. Nowadays all journals are shifted towards deep learning. So still if you rely on a conventional machine learning model, I am not very sure how you will get your paper or a project or something sanctioned or a paper published. That may be a bit difficult, right? But a regression model can be done. Try to incorporate your different idea of deep learning and only that's why understanding is important. If you understand it thoroughly, you can take that and put it in any of your application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a very wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you,
The
madam.
presentation was very nicely given. Like the flow was very slow, was very much patient, and everyone has understood in a very from the basics. They are able to understand in a very
Thank you.
easy manner about the deep learning. Thanks for
Okay.
your presentation,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Thank you, participants. Thank you for your patience listening. Maybe you may be hesitant to ask questions. If you have any questions, you can ask me in offline. Thank you. Thank you.
Participants, the next session will begin at 11:30. And one more thing is you will be getting a feedback link through the Atal AICTE. Only when you fill that, they'll be releasing you the certificates. Like attendance and assessment, we'll be uploading. And about the feedback, whatever the feedback, you get it through the Atal website. Today you will be getting that, so that you have to fill it up for you to receive a certificate. Thank you. Please do join with us at 11:30.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt. Good afternoon,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah.
This is
Yeah,
Sirisha.
yeah.
Really sorry
Yeah.
for the query.
It's
Sir,
okay. It's okay.
I have been hearing about transfer learning a lot these days, sir. Can
Okay.
you discuss, just help us with choosing right applications for transfer learning, sir?
Yeah. May I know in which application you are using, madam?
Actually, I have come across a paper where they have used some deep learning approach for metallurgy experiments, sir. I have come across a
Okay.
paper.
So it doesn't matter the actual application is what I'm asking is about the nature of the data, right? When you look at your raw data or analog data, it will be either text, signal, or image, right? So depending upon whether it is text, signal, or image, already if you Google down, there are several pre-trained models available separately for image processing, separately available for your text processing, and separately available for your number data processing. I'm not sure when you say metallurgy experiments, whether your data is in the form of a numerical data or a number or an image or a signal. If you go convert your metallurgy into image form, then you can use all this ImageNet, GoogleNet, ResNet, everything is available. If you have a signal data, then we have the Stanford NLP, then we have the BERT algorithm. These are the methods available for such. I am not very sure. I have not come across many pre-trained models with the numerical data. So can you specify whether your data is in the form of a number or a signal or an image?
So actually, it is not my paper. I have come across that paper, sir,
Okay.
where they have processed the microscopic images of steel compounds.
Yeah, that's what. That's an image in the sense it can be of any nature, right? So you go and check in the Google. Even in Google, all the informations are given, right? ImageNet, ResNet, DeepNet. These methods are widely useful for recognizing medical images, right? all other images like mobile net is there. I think mobile, mobile net is used for recognizing the objects, different objects is there. So you can make use of mobile net for recognizing your metallurgy based experiments. So you can Google down, you can find out the list of pre-trained models available for images, and then search inside that what are the images which it has been already trained with. So if your experiment images correlate with that, then you can make use of it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the suggestions, sir.
Thank you very much. I think the next session will be in another 5 minutes. Thank you, participants. Let us keep in touch.